I'm Akash Mistry, your host for the broadcast at CIO News. This is the recorded session and will be available on our website, cionews.co.in, and on CIO News LinkedIn handle. This is an exclusive fireside chat powered by Avaya on transformation through customer experience. Businesses are built by experiences they provide, and every day, millions of those experiences are delivered by Avaya. So Avaya is shaping what's next for the future of work with innovation and partnership that delivers a game-changing business benefit. So let's dive in and let me introduce my guest for today, Mr. Gaurav Jain, Senior Vice President of Technologies at IKS Health. So he basically leads a strong technology team that has been instrumental in design, development, and delivery of emerging technology solutions and services. He has been associated with IKS Health since its inception and has built a technology team from the scratch. He is a passionate advocate of needs of organization. We also have Mr. Adarsh Kaul from Avaya. He's India marketing lead at Avaya and also our moderator for today's session. He is an experienced business marketing specialist with a strong mix of strategic, analytic, and creative experience. He has proven the history of working in IT and telecom industry. So with over 20 plus years of experience in relevant and skilled expertise with leadership communication, marketing, management, customer acquisition, and relationship management. Over to you, Mr. Adarsh.
Thank you, Akash. Thank you very much. Those laurels kind of add up to the entire thing. Gaurav, first of all, a very warm welcome. Thank you very much for agreeing to be a part of this discussion. So, along with me, I've got a couple of my colleagues also pretty interested across, so they'll probably chip in as well. We've got Paritosh, who leads our cloud practice across from a perspective, and he's been a very keen follower from a healthcare perspective. And VT, sorry, VT, I call you VT because he's actually Vishal Thakkar, but he leads our entire spaces portfolio, which is prima facie one of the biggest collaboration product lines that we kind of look at healthcare. So the moment the word healthcare came in, both of them said that we want to chime in and kind of understand the perspective. So Gaurav, I'm sorry, I'm going to be placing you in hot boots across on things. Uh,
No.
yeah, but thanks again for doing this. Uh, you know, I'd straight away jump across down to my thoughts across on this. But before that, I'd love to know, what does IKS Healthcare do? So, for being belligerent about it, we'd love to understand: are you into healthcare provisioning? Are you a healthcare solution provider? Do you have HIS, HMISs, or do you actually work across from a perspective of patient health records or patient health management kind of a storyline? So, if you could
Sure.
elucidate on that, that'll be helpful.
Sure. So I guess is the provider enablement platform organization. We work with large to mid-sized provider organizations in the US, and we support the entire enterprise from the exam room to the front office to the back office through a combination of technology and human based solutions that eventually put together form the provider enablement platform for these organizations. So our solutions span across, helping physicians uh, provide, you know, be able to be more attentive towards their patients while we take on their load of documentation, provide them support on, making sure that their documents are available at the right place at the right time, to making sure patients are getting their prescription refill requests uh, on time, filled on time, to solutions that help them, collect the money from the insurance companies and or patients, to solutions that support them from a technology endeavor perspective, end to end. So, and put together the platform that we have built that combines technology and human provides end-to-end support to provider organizations.
Amazing. So that lovely. So I could probably draft across from the charter that we're talking about. So see, Gaurav, Avaya would and CIO News is looking at customer experience as the fulcrum of these conversations. So in your case, you actually are saying that you've got two sets of customer experiences to handle. You have your primary provider to whom you provide services, and then you're looking at also an extended arm of theirs, which is their customers whom you're directly interacting with. So that brings to me to my first question. So how is that being enabled across by you from a customer experience perspective? What are your standards across of recording customer experiences, kind of gravitating across from a feedback perspective, and how do you kind of manage that up so that your primary customer, which is the physician or the hospital, is kind of graded up in life, and how do you kind of satisfy the queries across of the customers whom they are servicing across? If you could give me a download across on that, that'll really help.
Absolutely. So, like you rightly said, Adarsh, uh, ultimately the customer that we're all dealing with here is the patient, right? Since we're talking about healthcare, while we service providers and their organizations, ultimately for us as well, the ultimate uh, customer is the patient that we're all trying to service. Now, your question is around how do we sort of how do we service them, how do we measure them, how do we measure whether how do we measure the customer experience, right? So obviously it's a tricky situation because you technically cannot uh, go to an end customer to directly end up measuring their satisfaction. That's the job of the customer in this particular case. And so for us, we look at customer experience measurement uh, in three different sort of uh, I guess I would say almost a pyramid, a three level pyramid, right? Strategic, episodic, and transactional. And the way we look at that is, from a strategic perspective, we're looking at a combination of primarily NPS, which is a combination of CSAT, earned growth, and and all of that. And we look at breaking down the NPS score granularly, and that enables us to understand what are our customer needs, what are the right next strategic steps, uh, do the segmentation analytics on finding measurement of multiple dimensions of the client's needs, and eventually how do we enrich the customer experience. Then we look at episodic. This is more looking at typically doing like monthly business reviews, quarterly business reviews, where we look at eventually sort of from a client perspective, looking at what are their key indicators and sort of overall business metrics, both input and output metrics, and how are they trending, and ultimately what value can we bring to the client, what value are they looking to get from us, and can we simplify and become a close knit partner for them. And then lastly, we look at transactional, right, which is daily transactional and transformational quality checks on the work that we're doing to help measure each transaction, because ultimately that each transaction is going to end up doing something or the other for the customer experience, both for our customers and for our customers, which are patients. So that's sort of how we we tend to look at customer experience and the framework that we deploy for customer experience.
Amazing. So, Gaurav, thanks. So that kind of gets me across from a measure perspective. But I right now am still trying to figure out from a perspective of how do you record them. For example, and I'm sorry, I'm just simplifying this question. I've always wanted to call myself a doctor. So I'm Dr. Kaul, and I'm a patient of IKS Healthcare. Oh, sorry, I'm a customer of IKS Healthcare. So Dr. Kaul is oncologist. For the change, I want to be an oncologist. And I
Mhm,
have like close to what, 50 or 100 customers. What
mhm.
is it that IKS gives across to me? And then how does IKS record the entire measure across from a perspective of
Sure.
what my customers are dealing with? So Dr. Cole gave them blah, blah, blah medicines, and these medicines worked or not. How do you get that entire message back into the system? Is it an
Ab-
app-based product? It's a portal-based product? That's the first part of my question, that how's the measure part of it happening across individually. And then when IKS actually looks at me as Dr. Cole, there'll probably be a Dr. Mistry, there'll probably a Dr. Bhatt, or there's probably a Shukla hospital, you know
mhm.
uh, how do you kind of differentiate across on the trendings of these different sets of people? So each doctor is a different patient set, and therefore a different record is record from them for their set of patients. That's the next part that I have, and I have a third set of the question which I'll probably ask post your answer to this one. So
Sure.
over to you on that front.
Sure. So, how do we measure, or what do we do in order to manage the customer experience, right? So, we really are now boiling down to what do we do for our customers. So, take an example, right? So, how do we provide a digital experience? Ultimately, can we provide in some form and shape some digital experiences for our customers that end up resulting in some form of digital experiences for our end clients, which are patients at the end of the day, right? So typically, that's how we're looking at this, and there's different interventions that we do there. So, and different ways that all of that gets recorded, right? So one, uh, the way we look at it is, so I'll give you an example. We have a product called AssureX. What this does is, when this is basically a automated prescription refill product. Now, when a patient, so we deal with only U.S. healthcare. Now, in the U.S., when a patient's medication is coming to an end, they have to request for a renewal, and that renewal request has to then go back to the physician from the pharmacy, and or directly from the patient, and the physician has to be able to review the renewal request, understand, run that renewal request through various different protocols, guidelines. When was the patient last seen? What were their vitals? Have they had their test, etc.? If it was, let's say, a diabetic medication, has the patient has the patient even reported their last measurement of their vitals, their HB1AC, and on all of those measures. Mm, So, when was that? And, can we renew this prescription, or do we really need to renew this for a shorter duration and ask the patient to come in? So, could be whatever those protocols and guidelines are. So, what IKS has done is we've built a product that then receives these from our clients' EHRs, processes these through automated guidelines, protocols, reviews the data, runs them through different kind of machine learning algorithms to do cleanup, etc. Does eventually identify whether all the protocols or guidelines are being satisfied or not satisfied, and eventually provides back a decision to the physician that it can be approved or cannot be approved, or whether all the guidelines were met, not met, etc. And ultimately, the physician then goes ahead and approves it, denies it, whatever. So what we're and we have a pharmacist in between that reviews the request as well, just to make sure that the machine didn't get it wrong as well. So healthcare, you don't want to take any chances. So we have a human in a loop model, as well. So ultimately, what this is doing, and others, why I'm talking about this example, is that renewal patients need medications. We don't know what situation the patient is in. If their medication is down to the last dose and they need it early, they might be running, they might be going out of town and they need it refilled before that. Could be any of those situations as well. So a timely closure of the medication is an important aspect, and by taking a technology led human in a loop model, we're now trying to help the physician turn this around in, whatever, 24, 48 hours or so, such that allowing the patient to receive the renewal request approval, in that timely fashion, and thus their medication. Now, all of this entire journey is recorded through digital checkpoints, if you wish. Both the time it was received, the time it was approved, the time, the protocols that met. And now I'll come to, so obviously the entire duration, are we doing it timely, etc. Ultimately, from a patient perspective, their experience is going to be determined by, are they receiving this on a timely basis or not. Did they receive the request back or the approval back in 48 hours or not? uh, what additionally, from a patient experience perspective, that we now add from a digital standpoint is that now we've added a process where, depending upon if they were not able to, sometimes the pharmacy has sent a wrong request. Instead of a 500 milligram request, they've sent a 1,000 milligram request. So in that case, making sure that patient safety issues are taken care of. Your patient might not even get to know about this, but we're going to get to know about this, and we're taking care of this and making sure that the patient is not receiving it. So ultimately, we're now making sure that the patient experience for our customer is taken care of in a very timely manner, and that time is what we're measuring whether the patient was, whether the patient safety issues were taken care of or not, or did the patient eventually get approved for a medication that they didn't have to be requested, or duplicate requests came in and all got approved. So we're actually eliminating all of that, and that's what we're measuring in the system. We're tracking it. It's all stored on the cloud, tracked, and then reported back in metrics to our end clients, not the patients, obviously, on how we were able to prevent all of these patient safety, all of these issues that could have led to, patient safety problems and whatnot as well.
Well, thanks. Completely answered absolutely the way I was looking at. Just one
And
small thing. How do you record these conversations? How do you, where do you engage the customer? And I understand that it's going to be a app or probably a portal through which they're accessing or processing their requests. But how do you actually capture? For example, if is there a survey that goes out? Is there a call that gets automated? And that's one part of it. The second part of it is, how do you crisis manage in this front? For example, Dr. Call, and I'm coming back to myself as a fancy calling myself Dr. Call, by the way. So if I'm Dr. Call, and I've had four customers who've kind of uh, who've kind of wherein I've kind of goofed up in the medication, if they want to complain about me, does IKS kind of track that? For example, if I've gone on Twitter, if I've gone on a Facebook, if I've gone on Insta, or I've probably gone across on a Pinterest and done written stuff about Dr. Call, and how do you track that out? And how do you actually pass it across down to Dr. Kaul, saying that, Dr. Kaul, guess what? Akash Mistry had this to say about you, and Isha but kind of shouted across on you, and Raksha Shukla thinks that your medication sucks. So, is there a measure of that, and what are the track points and the checkpoints on that front? I would love to know how do you track that?
sure. So a couple of things that we do and we don't, right? There is no way for us to directly measure and track the patient going to a Facebook, Twitter, etc., and complaining, right? Generally, this is healthcare. Healthcare uh, frustrations won't show up on social medias. Healthcare, if the patient got a wrong medication, what they're going to do is they're going to call up the clinic or the patient, where they see the doctor and saying, "I was given a wrong medication." Remember, the patient-physician relationship is very pristine. It's very important both for the physician and for the patient, right? The patient wants to be able to meet that doctor when they have a problem, etc., and they don't want that, they don't want to have to wait for 2 weeks to be able to see the physician. So they are normally going to call either the physician or the clinic. It's generally made through a call. And that call eventually, if it is due to an error that we did, whether approving the wrong medication, etc., would flow back through a digital feedback back to IKS in some form of, typically like an escalation mechanism. First of all, the error, the room for error here is almost negligible, right? I mean, we're talking about not even 0.001% of error is permitted in these kind of scenarios, to be honest, Adarsh. But when that happens, it's typically through an escalation mechanism, which is typically covered through either an email or a phone call back to what we call as a customer service leader that's focused on that client. That then goes back to, obviously, us recording that into our Salesforce on, we got an issue, we've, on this particular client, and it obviously impacts the NPS, etc. And some of it makes it to the transactional quality system to understand why did the quality issue happen and how will we go back and fix that. So that's sort of how it gets recorded. It's not a very traditional you know like a very B2C kind of a app or a portal where the customer is going to go ahead and put a comment in Facebook and we're getting those Facebook tweets, Facebook messages, and we're then creating intelligence out of it. Generally, in healthcare, it's very focused on ultimately the patient goes back to their physician or the clinic, and through that it is channeled back to us, if you wish.
Interesting. So what
I,
you're saying
I
is that, sorry, sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
I have a add-on question to this. So I understand. So B2C is not there much and all that stuff. So you as a provider is talking to the healthcare vendors and all. But as a process automation, because there's a lot of automation involved in this, and there's hardly any negligible errors, there must be some kind of alerts, notification. What is the role of a communication channel in all this? Because whether I understand voice is the main thing, but then there must be some proactive alerts, proactive messaging, which is done, some appointments getting scheduled, some documents not getting properly documented or scribbled out. There are errors to that. So how does this whole piece works on a communication side?
So, from a communication perspective, in all of this, Pratush, the way it is the the application is capturing every single data point, every single instance of the work that's happening, right? And then we talked about transactional quality that's getting checked for, etc. Like you said, there are alerts that are built into the system that if the system is checking for issues, etc., it's alerting and making sure that those are being taken care of, etc. From a from so there's that aspect of it that comes into the picture, that then is recorded obviously within the portal, within the cloud, on of any issues that are happening within the system, if you wish, or within the whole people process, if you wish, as well. Typically, from a physician standpoint, uh, their intersections is their intersection with us is either through some form of they typically would raise a issue, etc., through more like forms and survey forms, or not even survey forms but issue forms, if you wish, to saying I had an issue with this particular instance. I had this was wrong, this came to me wrong, etc. Generally, that's how that works, as well.
Got that.
I don't know if I answered your question,
No,
but
no, I think that is fine. And second, I want to take it to a different perspective altogether. This is all about what you do and how you serve your end providers and all that. But
Mhm,
at the end of the day, you are a provider, right? You
mhm,
have a platform and you are reaching to
mhm,
multiple more vendors and healthcare providers to sell
mhm,
your product, right?
mhm.
How does that piece happens? Because that is also something very important, right? You want to reach out to more and more people and you want to tell them about your product, tell them about your value adds, how you can help the end customer or them. Uh, how does that piece happens?
Sure. So from a end customer perspective, or from our customer perspective,
Yeah, your
typically our
customer. Yeah.
customers are large physician enterprises. These are typically either health system owned. These are either academic health centers, large academic health centers, private equity owned group physician groups, and or physician owned physician groups in the US. And obviously, there's two or three ways that the overall sales process, Paritosh, which is what you're trying to understand, happens, right? So we've got a marketing team that releases a lot of marketing material on to the web, onto LinkedIn and social media and other channels, and then uh, we've got a very consultative selling process, right? So, we're typically working, we reach out to the end clients. Typically, our buyers in most of these cases are C-suites within these organizations, and they, typically it's healthcare is a very close knit network, right? So, you would meet them at either through
Forums
your
and all that.
network,
Yeah.
through referrals, etc. And through that, then you're basically help understanding and mapping out what are the client challenges, right? So you would identify what are typically the challenges that they're running into, and how can our solution solve for those problems as well. And that's how then our solutions are then sort of taken to these clients and clients, etc. We create, what how will while we've got a platform, how that platform will then be custom adopted to them to be able to eventually solve for the problems that they're trying to solve. So typically that's how we go about it. We were, where we are different in this case, Paritosh, is because our sales are largely B2B. These are all large B2B. We're going and talking to large scale, big provider groups. Um, and these are driven through, uh, not as driven through largely, any kind of ad sales and things like that. These are more, you know, both the end client has a need and a problem, and we have a solution that we're looking at, and it is generally healthcare is, like I said, very very close knit, right? So you're in the right forums with them. So we obviously participate in a lot of forums, we're in a lot of groups, etc. Large physician group organizations in the US where we're able to connect with some of these C suites, and bring to them what solutions we provide, etc. as well. So I don't know if that
Got
helps
that.
answer the
No, no,
question.
that helps. Yeah, and I'm sure referral has will be part of this because this industry works on referrals, right?
That's correct.
That's
Referrals play a big role, and typically, these are C-suite referrals, right? John knows, Larry, and Larry is talking about his problems to John, and John says, yeah, hey, I've got iCare Health that has done this for this other friend of mine, and why don't you talk to them and go from there? So that does play a big role
so.
in our.
Got that. And on your side, I'm sure because you are a provider, you also do uh, the processing part of it also as IKS Health. Like, let's say there is a scribbling or a transcription required for the to free up the times of physicians. You only provide the platforms, or you do that kind of job here
So we,
as back
like I said,
office.
we're a human in a loop model, right? So we talked about Scribble, if you wish, right? So Scribble is a AI enabled, physician, physician scribe platform, right? So it's AI, or AI enabled clinical documentation platform that helps reduce the burden for physicians, and allows them to focus on their patients more. And in that case, it's AI enabled, but ultimately there's also a human in a loop, that's which are these are physicians themselves in India that are then working through providing these documentation or chart note, as you referred to, Paritosh, back to the end physician, if you wish.
So how big is this team, and how big is this department of yours?
So we're a 6,000 plus people company, overall, Paritosh, end to end, across all our solutions at this point in time. So I'm not sure, I mean, necessarily a product. I mean, overall, as an organization, each of our products are, like I said, tech-led, human-enabled solution that then, provides the platform provides certain aspects, then and the humans help close the last mile loop through closing, what and thus taking away, Paritosh, like you said, do you do processing? Yes. AI enables, or machine, the technology enables it, provides what needs to happen or where it needs to go. Ultimately, now, instead of putting that burden back onto the end clients, we take on that burden and make sure that we help close the loop for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Gaurav, what's the kind of transaction load that you do on a daily basis across, considering that you're currently in the US itself?
That will be a difficult question because these are spread across different platforms. Adarsh, I wouldn't have exactly the volume because the number of transactions on each product will be very different across the client. So each of our clients are sort of, even from a platform perspective, completely partitioned off into their own databases, into their own things, because we cannot in healthcare merge data from one client to another. So it's pretty. So I wouldn't have the volume answer. Sorry about that. Of
Okay.
exactly how much volume across each of the product lines that we process, if you wish.
So the other question that I have across is based on the fact that, the fact that you don't have an answer on the volume part of it, that definitely means there's a definitive decent amount of volume. Now,
Mhm.
how do you manage that data security? How do you kind of manage the data security and privacy across from a perspective of business lines, considering that GDPR norms across are big in the US and considering that you're kind of focusing on that market right now? So, how do you manage that part? And how important is cloud? For example, Dr. John said this thing that, I don't care about the fact that I don't want it in cloud. I want the box to sit in my office. Would
Mhm.
you be able to do that for them, or is it a hybrid model? Is it a pure cloud model? That's one part of it. And the other thing is that how do you manage the security part of it, and how do you ensure that that's all complied across?
Yeah, sure. So US actually follows more of HIPAA and SOC, so largely governed through SOC 1 and SOC 2, type 2 kind of controls, and slowly is moving towards a high trust set of requirements. So GDPR is more for the UK and other part of the country, other part of the world, but US is very specifically very strong in on healthcare on both SOC 2 and type 2, and then high trust. So we are already a SOC 1, SOC 2, type 2, ISO 9001, 27001 certified organization, and we are in the process actually of becoming a high trust certified organization as well. So others, these protocols and requirements mandate very specific controls across the processes, across the technology, across every aspect of our, even our build out that we do, for hosting our technology, for building our technology, even to the point where how we program is governed by these protocols, or by these guidelines, if you wish, right? So there are very specific requirements that they mandate. So that sort of is one pillar of the security and compliance aspect, right? Those are what is needed. Now, how do we do it? Is so where you asked a couple of questions. One, are you hosted? Are you hybrid? Whatever. So obviously, it's a combination. So we don't typically, we are on the cloud already. We host all our portals, our platforms within the cloud. For certain parts of our platform, the end user interface for our um, physicians is provided them through either a portal or through a or through a tablet in some cases. So we have a solution where, we talked about Scribble, where a tablet provided by IKS is hosting our platform, one part of the interface to that interacts back with our cloud. So that's one interface that comes in. And then, there are data extraction components, etc., that sit within the client environment and push data or pull data from our platform and pushes it back into the client environment. So that part of it is in that sense hybrid, but otherwise largely cloud from an IKS perspective. And then the other part of the physician interface also happens is the physicians and or the other parts of the physician enterprises are interacting with what they have as EHR and a practice management system. And we typically interface with that, read and write back to it, so that sometimes we're not trying to impact the end physician's, um, we're not trying to add another application now in their portfolio for them to have to look at and work on, right? I mean, they're already burdened with 10 applications that they now have to go through, and another portal is going to create a lot of challenges. So it's a combination of these two or three interfaces. And then from a overall hosting perspective, we host everything in the cloud, And there are some components that will sit in a client environment either through in form of a tablet and or data extraction and data pull components, etc., that just is helping with the interface part of the platform, if you wish. um, I don't know if that answers your question or not,
It does.
but
It does. It does.
that's
So,
how it is.
and then I'll probably, I know we're kind of getting to the top of the hour, but a couple of questions which clearly hit my mind. Uh, did you see an offtake on the business from a COVID perspective, or was this an established product line before the COVID part of it? That's one part of it. And how did you actually accentuate the entire offering during the COVID part of it? I'm sure that the US market also went down through the toughest times across rather. I think India and US were probably one of the bigger ones which were affected. How did you kind of work that out? That's one part of it. And the other thing is, uh, currently what I understand is the solution is working towards the entire offering from a doctor to patient offering.
Mhm.
How did it kind of affect across from a exact consulting option? So, for example, doctors went remote. Did you have a remote patient healthcare system which was there, which went online for them? And if there was, uh, what were the kind of things that were there? And the last part of this part of the question is that did you kind of replicate any of this in Desh, in our country, for just during the COVID time of it?
Yeah. So, our solutions are very, very specifically designed. I'll take on the last question first. Is very specifically designed for U.S. healthcare. So, right out of the box, they don't necessarily fit into the India healthcare system, if you wish. The core infrastructure within India healthcare doesn't exist. The same maturity of uh, data interoperability, etc., doesn't exist in India as of right now. There is no standard of data interoperability, if you wish, in India still. And India, most physicians don't even have EHRs and practice managements. And COVID saw in India specifically some of the base systems showing up, very basic systems showing up for for these providers in India, which again were very basic in terms of their capabilities, and thus don't lend themselves to our solutions, if you wish, others. So not necessarily, we couldn't necessarily cater back to the India market in terms of from a COVID standpoint. Now, coming back to did we have to innovate during COVID? So we did have to for some parts of our solution. Some parts of our solution didn't make a difference because they're just working in the background, and what we largely had to take care of is moving our people from working from office to working from home. Right, that was the part of the puzzle that we had to solve for. Build the right security controls, build the right structures in a place, make sure the VPNs are up and running, all of that, right? So that that was primarily one aspect. But there was, like, Paritosh was discussing about um, the solution that the physicians use, which is to be able to help them with their clinical documentation, which we call Scribble. Now, for that part of the solution, we did have to innovate slightly in the sense that we had to provide. So while our tablet solution lended itself pretty well to a physician could take that tablet home, but it still had to be enabled at home because our clients obviously do not currently allow those tablets to work outside their clinics. So we had to work with our end clients, make sure that we quickly added a component within the tablet such that it allowed them to create a remote secure connection even from homes and home-based Wi-Fi, such that the physicians were able to use the clinical documentation capability from the comfort of their homes. And for clients that couldn't either enable them or couldn't enable that, then we did build out a web version of the same product that they could just pull up on a browser, and while they had their telemedicine softwares working, Teams and Avaya and all the telemedicine softwares that were working, our solution would work in the background on a browser and would help do the same functionality of recording, transmitting, showing them the schedules, etc., to be able to take away the documentation pain. Because the physicians that were seeing patients from home had a larger volume, if you wish. So that's sort of how we had to pivot a little bit, if you wish. The larger pivot was us having our folks working from home, making sure that the right structures and processes were set up for them, the right controls were set up, etc. And that work was happening as desired as well. And then at the same time, making sure as things were working now, our end customer was still receiving the same quality outcome that they were receiving while we were working from office. And
Easy. Gaurav, I'll probably ask you this one last question from a statement line perspective.
Mhm.
If I would look at IKS from a perspective, and I'll ask this question to you since you talk tech and you're the senior VP of tech, would IKS Healthcare be deemed across as an organization which is primarily a tech company doing healthcare? Or I would probably deem IKS as an organization which knows healthcare and uses tech to deliver solutions across. In other words, would healthcare be replaced across with BFSI tomorrow, considering that you already know a certain area and just getting in across an industry, exposure onto it, getting you yourself migrated onto that industry be easier? Or are you a healthcare company which kind of knows the tech portion of it? How would you deem yourself?
yeah, yeah, very interesting. So we are a healthcare company that is technology led. So we are basically, what they typically refer to others as a health tech company. So healthcare is our DNA, and we have, I don't know, 8,000 plus doctors on board within our organization. There are 1,000 doctors that work for IKS, right? We've got, I don't know, 600, 700 pharmacists that work for IKS. We've got 500 odd engineers, technologists that work. So it's a combination, if you wish. If you, as you can see, it's an amalgamation of a lot of healthcare expertise, deep expertise in US healthcare, combined with technology to be able to enable, what we refer to as, being able to provide safer, safer and more efficient care for the patients, right? So, ultimately, better, safer, and more efficient care for our patients, is what we want to do, and that is done through both expertise, deep expertise in healthcare, and combining it with strong technology to be able to enable that better, safer, and more efficient care, if you wish.
Yes, lovely. Beautifully answered, Gaurav. Just one last
Mhm.
curiosity-based question.
Sure.
Why only US? When do you come down to India? Products like such as yours should primarily be taken up across by most of our doctors. And why not the European market? Why just the US? When do we see you expanding? Or any plans of expanding?
Yeah. So, Adarsh, why only US? I think uh, the there's so much context needed in healthcare. Every healthcare system in the world is very different.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we believe in is excellence. We don't want to do anything half-hearted, half-baked, half half excellent. We believe in excellence, and which is why, I don't know if I can really comment on when will we expand to other markets. But even within the US, others, if you really look at it, we actually focus primarily on the outpatient side of the work. We don't work like where, some of these solutions could be also provided to hospitals for the inpatient side of the healthcare, but we actually only work in the outpatient side of the healthcare. So we've particularly, even how our businesses run are very, we've got cohorts of specialty based focus. Within our organization that only focus on single specialty groups, multi specialty groups, cardiology groups, OBGYN groups, etc. So the way we have basically focused ourselves is create expertise and do excellent work. And thus we're in no rush to saying let's go to 10 other markets and be able to provide them whatever we're doing. We want to be able to provide with a lot of high excellence. And that's really the answer to why we're right now focused on just the US, and within the US only within the outpatient part of the market.
Thank you, Gaurav. On that note, my line of question kind of ends out here. Thank you very, very much for your time. Seriously, it was just lovely understanding that perspective. Just the fact that I'm feeling saddened that I live in India and I don't have access to products like, you know, yours who are parring doctors who probably see me. Akash, over to you. Thank you again, Gaurav, for this time.
Thank you, Adarsh. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Gaurav, for sharing your thoughts and the journey with us. Thank you, Mr. Adarsh, for driving this interview.